an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Vorkosigan Saga, Book 1, Shards of Honor, Chapters 14, 15, and Aftermaths. In these chapters, well, we get a really sort of matter-of-fact, and then they got married. We then get a promotion of the worst kind. And then to close it all out, a really human slice of death moment. It was affecting. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to, is it Jeff today who's commissioning this episode? I'm so sorry. I meant to triple check this and I forgot. Yes, it is. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you so much, bud. These chapters, first of all, I was taken aback by the fact that the book was already ending. I didn't even realize how close to the end we were. I tend to not really look ahead at all if I can keep myself from doing it for like practical reasons, because it can influence what I think is going to happen. If I know I'm near an end and I think that there's like going to be some sort of climax, or, you know, the timing works out for that. And this book felt like it went by so fast. And I haven't looked into the lengths of the other books. I'm curious that whether or not like they tend towards being this length, or if like so many series, they get longer and longer as time goes on. And I had gotten a message, I think from Sophia, if I'm not mistaken, just talking about how there are some novellas that are put together in a compendium and figuring out how to cover those as well. So there's going to be a lot of stuff happening, but this series, remind me, you guys, it's like in the teens, right? The number of books there are to it, if I'm remembering right. But anyway, okay, so let's get on task here with chapter 14. I love this so much. So our girl has escaped from the people who were trying to yellow wallpaper her in the previous section, and she has rented a flyer and just goes to Vorkosigan's house. I never, and this is just me, like, you guys, it's not even that there's a reason for me to think the thing. You know how that is? It's more like I just make this certain assumption, and even in real life, it wouldn't really make a lot of sense. So what I'm saying is I didn't expect that she would be able to find out where he lived and just like show up. I had an idea in my head that wherever Vorkosigan lived would be considered like basically like protected airspace, and that her flying in would simply not be allowed. That there would be somebody who would intercept her and keep her from doing this. Because I thought of him as being so important that it would be similar to the White House. You know, how there's just like a no-fly zone around it. That's what I was thinking. And like, honestly, later on, when we find out that there is a flyer that follows him around all the time, and that their sole thing is meant to be to keep him from killing himself, which he is more than willing to do, I do think it is a little surprising that nobody like challenges her flying in. I don't actually have a problem with it, really. I just wanted to mention that it was something that, like, when I realized, oh, she's here, and I asked myself, why am I so surprised by this? It was a security thing. So first person that she runs into is Sergeant Bothari, who has a moment of like not quite recognizing her, and then once he realizes, his whole aspect toward her really like calms down. And there was just something about the fact that he is so... I don't want to overstate it and say that he seems glad to see her. I feel like that's probably too much. But I really did think that it was comforting for him when he realized who she was. I can't help but feel as if what they both went through together has bonded them in a way that she feels like a safe person for him somehow. And as things continue and we find out what we do, I think that is only underscored by what we find out he is sharing with her. So, first, she runs into Errol's father, Count Vorkosigan. This dude, he says, my son said very little, and it did not lead me to think I might meet you. You have no idea how pleased I am to be wrong. There is a little pavilion at the top of our property overlooking the lake. He, sits up there most of the time. I really liked the little hesitation before the word sits, because to me that said he had been about to say drinks. He was like a step away from being like, he drinks up there. Sits. He sits up there. Oh, does he? So this, I wasn't expecting the way that this goes at all, because she asks the Count right here, is he sober? I don't know how to ask this, but is he sober? And kids, I didn't even consider that he wouldn't be sober. I really thought that it was going to be this, like, I don't know, just the fact that she assumed. That's her direct question when she asks, is he sober? It surprised me that it was one of the first things that she asked. I just wanted to know where she got from their conversations. And I know that it's probably been mentioned by him that he has a tendency to drink, and, I just don't recall. So when she goes and finds him, she's a lot less taken off guard by the state she finds him in than I would have expected. Because this man, first of all, it's not just that he's drunk. It's that he is trying to get to a point where he passes out. That is the kind of drunk we're talking about. He tries to get in there right after lunch, or right after breakfast, so that he can be down by lunch, as he puts it. And he takes the next day, when it's just all recovery time, he's like, yeah, I get to spend a whole day just hungover, which is also a really great way to take your mind off things, by just dealing with a horrible hangover. Y'all, I know, I 100% know this is the way some people cope with shit. And I'm not trying to judge that, because the way I cope isn't healthier. I mean, maybe it's like technically, like, physically, biologically healthier, but it's not like mentally healthier. You know what I'm saying? So I am not trying to pass judgment on this. I am just so, like, I am so personally affected by alcohol. Like, I have a very, very low tolerance, and when I get drunk, I go very quickly from, like, pleasantly buzzed to throwing up. The idea of doing this to myself repeatedly, it simply does not compute for me. Like, there are so many better ways, I would think, to, like, numb yourself out. And this sounds so wretched. Like, it's just, oh man, I just, this type of intoxication is just one that always feels like I'm an alien. I just don't understand the appeal. So when she gets up there, I love this. He's wearing this, like, basically what I'm imagining is like a hot pink Hawaiian shirt. And he's got like sandals and black like his uniform trousers, but like an old pair. Hasn't shaved. He just looks like shit. And the first thing she says, he hasn't even spotted her yet, is, oh, is that liquid breakfast as tasty as oatmeal and blue cheese dressing? And he sees her. He tries to get up initially. That doesn't work out for him. So he has to fall back again. And says, oh, you're not a hallucination. And I was like, yeah, dog, like, I'm sure you wish. I feel she is, in this moment, a little regretful of the fact that she has surprised him by sneaking up on him. Because she feels his embarrassment and just wishes that she had given him a chance to collect himself, I think. For her, I don't believe this changes her opinion of him at all. You know, I really think that she would feel the same way about him anyway. It doesn't matter to her. But I think that any of us, if we are really into a person, being caught off guard by them appearing at like the worst moments in our day when we're actively harming ourselves, that's just not the way that you want to get found. That's not fun, you know? So she tries to like put him at his ease a little bit, but she does say, like, are you just trying to kill yourself here? Like, and he says to her, I thought I was being subtle. And I was just like, to whom, sir? Like, you're telling her that you wake up with the intent to get drunk enough that you're unconscious by a certain time of day. That's nobody's not seeing what that is. You're not hiding that. Who do you think these people are around you? They're not morons. Everybody's aware of what's going on here. And she finds out that this shirt that he's wearing was a gift from his men when he was promoted. And oh my God, you guys, I'm so sorry. I have to take this away from Pippin. Pippin, that's Chopper. That's Tony Chopper. You can't chew this, buddy. This is mine. Oh my God, he took my little guy. I'm so sorry, you guys, but I can't let him have Tony. Tony Chopper is a precious baby. I'm sorry, Pippin, but you can't have that. Pippin's like, what the fuck? I was playing with that. I'm sorry, buddy. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so the shirt was a gift it was like a joke gift for when he got a promotion. And, it's like a cute moment of being like, oh yeah, I could totally see, you know, people doing this. But then when she's like, oh, that's nice. He says, yeah, you know, 3 of the 4 of them are dead. 2 died at Escobar. And she's just like, oh. So much for the light chit chat. Yeah, that's rough. What it must be like to live a life where even lovely things are tainted with these sorts of events. That's really a tough way to live, man. You know? It just, God. So he asks her, like, she realizes that he is sort of thinking that she's just here for a visit. And is wondering how long she's going to stay. And she tells him, as long as you like. I went home and things had changed, or I had changed. And she says, I offended nearly everybody and left one step ahead of a whole lot of trouble. I can't go back. I resigned my commission and everything I own is in the back of that flyer down there. And this is one of those things that it's not actually that important, but I'm curious how you guys all felt about it. I really wanted to see his reaction to her telling him what happened. And I was a little disappointed at the fact that we don't get to see that, because the story is so wild, and the assumptions that they make are like so insulting and infuriating. And I know that there's very little he's going to say that would be particularly surprising, probably, you know. I'm sure it would just be something of like, you're kidding, those bastards, and that would pretty much be it, because what are you going to do? But I did just a little bit feel like I wanted to see her telling him the story. And the way that she frames it as, I offended nearly everybody, there's something about that wording that to me just wildly misrepresents what was happening there. And I don't know if that's just me, but it was like, offended everybody just has a certain sound to it that is so much milder than they thought I was a sleeper agent, basically. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So anyway, I just personally was looking forward to this moment, and I felt a little bit unsatisfied with the way that it went. And it's not a huge deal, but it definitely had a sort of like a feel to me of, I bet they have this conversation off page, which does make sense, but I feel a little bit ripped off that I didn't get to see it. It's just what happened to her is so bonkers, man. So we have a break in the chapter, and then it just says, a few weeks after their marriage, they took their first trip together. You guys, can we just like take a moment to deeply applaud the fact that it's just hand waved that they got married? I don't know why this cracked me up so bad, but just it's taken for granted. Of course they got married. We don't need to see the wedding. We don't need to know anything about it. And then it's like weeks later, and also we were there for their first kiss, but we don't actually get to see them fuck, which, look, that's fine. Personally, sex scenes are so iffy that I don't know if I want that. That's just not the vibe of these books to me. Which is weird considering how graphic they are otherwise. It really shouldn't be that much of like, you know what I'm saying? But I was still sort of laughing to myself at the fact that we just immediately leap to this whole other state of being with them. And considering how romance heavy this book has been, and the tropes surrounding what romance usually focuses on, I was super unprepared for it to just not be the focal point of the narrative at all. I like it. Just to be clear, I enjoy it. But it was so... This book has felt, I've said before, so modern as I'm reading it. I would just never have guessed how early on it was written. Even the tech that is talked about has a feel to it that's very modern. And so much of it is like, she underwrites the descriptions of a lot of the tech just enough that you can sort of fill in the ideas mentally with relevant tech from today. And so I feel like she really manages to like balance this line that no matter when you read it and no matter how far along the tech is, it's going to feel updated because she's letting you do that part, if that makes sense. But anyway, the feeling of it being modern, things like this are kind of what helps to underscore that. You know, the romance is such a huge part of what's going on between the two of them, and it's so much of the conflict. And then they get married, and it's literally off page, and then we just come back, and here they are. So they're at the facility with the canisters that had the fetuses in them. And the reason that they are here for this particular event is because Bothari is going to be taking custody of the one that is his, that he impregnated this Elena woman when he was forced to rape her. And you guys, the subtlety of the way this author describes what's going on with Bothari, I appreciate so much, because she could have made him just sort of like Lenny from Of Mice and Men, where it's like, you know, he's been made to do terrible things, but he is a decent person at heart who would never hurt somebody voluntarily. And there is an element of that with Bothari, but there's also the nuance later on when she's talking about him with Vorkosigan, and he tells her, like, listen, he was trying to help this girl. He wasn't interested in torturing her, but he was also still having sex with her. And so you can think of him as having a sort of pure motive, if you like, but that's not exactly true. He isn't this, like, faultless angel. He is somebody who is deeply confused about, like, his own priorities and does his best and sometimes doesn't get it right. And I just appreciate that Bothari is, like, such a interesting combination of a person doing their best and also a person who's, like, really been damaged and is their judgment is going to be off a little bit. That's something that I think a lot of people underestimate the effect that can have. When you have gone through a lot of trauma, it affects the way that you see the trauma of other people. And that's just like, that's not something that's I'm making a judgment about. This is just the way that that sort of thing is going to work. And so the idea of having somebody who has been put through the kind of trauma that he has, but then what? Just makes the right decision every time about how to treat other people, that isn't likely, psychologically speaking, you know? So I just really appreciate the nuance of him being somebody who is doing the best that he can and not always really understanding the, like, subtlety of what he's doing versus the things that he was made to do. And here it's like he has created this sort of storyline for himself, for lack of a better word, where he is saying, like, oh, I'm going to tell my daughter, because I think it is a daughter, a little girl, that me and her mother were married, because it's not good to be a bastard here, and I won't let anybody call her that. And he is saying this, and he is fully, like, you know, filling in this fantasy for Cordelia. But there is, like, later on we find out that this fantasy, it's not the first time that this has been brought up. This is something that he was whispering to Elena while he was with her and while he was raping her still, but alone, you know? It's, like, unclear whether there was any sense of it being consensual. And I'm going to go ahead... I'm going to go ahead and guess there really wasn't, that Vorkosigan was just sort of being delicate with the way that he, like, described it. Because the way that he says it is, like, he was still sleeping with her. And from the way the girl was behaving when Cordelia joined her in the bunk area, and how she was, like, I don't know if catatonic is too strong a word, but it does kind of seem like that's where she was. I have to assume she was not in a state that she could give consent in a way that would feel meaningful. That said, I don't want to discount somebody's trauma, but you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just going to be a certain sense of, well, what else am I going to do in the situation she was in? And I don't know that there's any way to call that consensual. And even if it were, would he care? And the vibe I get is he doesn't have good enough judgment to be able to care at this point. Like, he is, the consent to him is part of the fantasy, and he is so immersed in this other version of events that consent is like beyond something that he can even quantify at this point. So anyway, there is a fascinating moment here, where first of all, she finds out that there's a flyer that's been following them, and Vorkosigan tells her, yeah, they do this a lot, and I like to fuck with them by doing really crazy shit that would make them kind of lose their minds. And he tells her about how he used to drive drunk all the time. The one issue that I had with this was that it is not mentioned the fact that he is putting other people's lives in danger when he does this. That was the only thing that I was sort of like, is anybody going to say anything about that? Because, you know, like, yeah, you're out here drunk driving. It's not just your own life that you're risking when you do that. And nobody really says that. And I was just like, okay. But what comes up, this is amazing. She says, I'm surprised you didn't have a wreck. I did once, he admitted. Twice, Bothari commented unexpectedly. I beg your pardon, Sergeant? You wrecked it twice. You don't remember the second time. Your father said he wasn't surprised. We helped pour you out of the safety cage. You were unconscious for a day. Vorkosigan looked startled. Are you pulling my leg, Sergeant? No, sir. You can go look at the pieces of the flyer. They're scattered for 1.5 kilometers down Dendari Gorge. Vorkosigan cleared his throat and shrunk down in his seat. I see. He was quiet, then added, how unpleasant to have a blank like that in one's memory. Yes, sir, agreed Bothari blandly. Oh my God, you guys. I loved this so much. I can't even tell you. Oh my God. It's like such a wonderful combination of things happening here. It's the fact that he's realizing it could happen to you and clearly has never considered that it would happen to him. It's the fact that he really thought he had shit under control and was operating with totally incorrect information. Not only was his info correct, but the people around him had the correct information and felt no need to give it to him. Which there is a certain something about knowing the folks that you are surrounded with know more about you than you do. That is truly like, that would make me have vertigo. That would just completely fuck my head right up. It's just the whole sense of his taking this, like, sabbatical is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he's over here just drinking himself into the ground. And he really has in his head a notion of how it's going and how in control he is of it. And then to find out, actually, you came a lot closer to death than you seem to think you did. It just underscores how this man is like, while he does seem to have more discipline and more control than a lot of people, the nature of what he was trying to do, like, he was succeeding. That was the point, right? He was kind of like, had a little bit of a death wish. And just wound up being as successful at that as he is at everything, apparently, but didn't realize it. It's just, in combination with how many other people, Elena being one of them, like we found out that Elena had been drugged to forget things, and that when she was back on Beta, that she was therapized until they broke through those drugs and she was able to remember. And Bothari earlier had mentioned that there are ways to, like, defeat the memory drugs if you really want to. And he didn't know this. Vorkosigan is like, what do you mean? And he says, well, you write things down, you hide it places, and you, it's better if you have, like, an object. And it turns out that he had a lock of hair. So the whole approach to the memory thing, it's fascinating to me as a reader, because the implications of this are that well, if Cordelia had had something done to her, how would I know as a reader? Because there are people, multiple people that we have met who otherwise are completely coherent, and they've got these massive gaps, or they can be made. It puts me on edge a little bit, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a plot coming up in a later book where we wind up finding out eventually that the memories that we're working with as readers and that the main character is working with are not accurate. And while I totally love that as a plot device, this is not a complaint. It sounds so frightening, because the concept to me of not being able to trust your own mind is one of those like worst nightmare scenarios. It's the same as dementia, reaching a point where if you have like Alzheimer's and you can't remember who people are, finding out that like, yeah, you could still technically be alive, but who you are as a person is gone because your personality has changed so much that you've almost already died. That is just terrifying to me. So this whole conversation between the two of them, that like, I feel like we're going to come back to some stuff about that eventually. And then, when they actually get to the location where the canisters are, this man who is in charge, what is this guy's name? I'm trying to find it. Ensign Kudelka, I think is how you say that. He is clearly like this. Oh no, I'm sorry. This Kudelka's the one who's going through his physical therapy, right? Yeah. Here it is. Tasting colors with your left foot, or feeling things that aren't there, like bugs crawling all over you, or not feeling things that are there. This dude is going through it and is going to have to be taken off active duty, and is very bummed by the fact that whatever he's going to have to do is going to be desk duty. He winds up with a very plum situation, but at this point he is still feeling a little despairing, and he's trying so hard to like keep a good face on, but it's clear anytime that Vorkosigan is sort of not looking at him, or he forgets he's there, this guy is just like disheartened, and he is trying so hard to be positive, but it's not a positive situation. You get to feel how you feel, dude. I'm sorry guys if you can hear that. Pippin is chewing on a bone over here. He's very, what's the word? Restless. Normally he goes to the park at this time, but it's been pouring out. We're having a storm, so he can't go. Okay, this is when they go to the research wing. So the doctor clearly thinks that the child they are about to take out of this canister, he calls it a hatching because they're coming out, but it's not really like a birth, that doesn't quite make sense. He thinks that this baby is either Cordelia and Botharies, or Cordelia and Verace, or maybe Cordelia and Vorkosigans. Like, who knows? But it's very clear that the way that she and Vorkosigan are behaving is like pointing this guy into the direction of this being like a way more personal thing for the two of them than it is. They're behaving this way on behalf of Bothari because they're keeping this secret for his sake, because he doesn't want people knowing that his daughter is a bastard, even though I have to assume folks are going to know, really. But yeah, this whole like misunderstanding, I'm sort of wondering if that's going to wind up being an issue later. Because Vorkosigan's, when she like points out, what he thinks, his instinct is to go back and correct this guy and tell him like, hey, that's not what's going on here. And she stops him and just is like, the more you just deny it, the more suspicious it's going to look. Like, just let it go. And I think that's the right way to handle it as well, because I do think pointing it out by like turning around and making a scene is going to just draw more attention to the whole thing. However, it did make me wonder if the two of them do have kids, which it's mentioned in this chapter that's like something they're both hoping for. I can't help but wonder if it's going to kind of come back to bite them. That there's this rumor that's been going around, you know? Maybe it will be nothing. But it did have me on a little bit of high alert. And yeah, Bothari, he's so sweet. Like, he sees her and he's like, are we sure she's the right one? Because I thought that she would have a bigger nose, because he's got a really big nose. Cordelia says, like, all babies have small noses when they're born, and I was like, that is absolutely not true. If y'all have ever seen a baby with a honker, you know what I'm talking about. But there are babies out there that they got schnozolas, and that's fine. But it's absolutely untrue that they all have little noses. I mean, sometimes babies just be born with a face, and that face is facing. So, anyway, they go to eat, and he asks to stay behind, and just is like, oh, I'm not hungry. And I was just like, aw, Bothari, he's going to spend some time with his little baby. So, let's see. Yeah, here it is. This is when Vorkosigan explains to her what happened with Bothari. He begged the body from him, so to speak, took her off to his own cabin. Verace assumed to continue torturing her, presumably in imitation of his sweet self. He was flattered and left them alone. Bothari fuzzed his monitors somehow. Nobody has the foggiest idea what he was doing in there every minute of his off-duty time. But he came to me with this list of medical supplies he wanted me to sneak to him. Anesthetic salves, some things for treatment of shock, really a well-thought-out list. He was good at first aid from his combat experience. It occurred to me then he wasn't torturing her, he just wanted Verace to think so. He was insane, not stupid. He was in love, in some weird way, and had the mother wit not to let Verace guess. And then he says he took care of her in his cabin, fed her, dressed her, washed her, all the while keeping up this whispered dialogue. He supplied both halves. He had apparently worked out this elaborate fantasy in which she was in love with him, married, in fact, a normal, sane, happy couple. And yeah, the whole thing is just grotesque, and I wonder about this girl, Elena, and if we're going to see her again and see any of the fallout from this. Like, I don't want to. Just to be clear, like, that is not something I'm really looking for. I think you could do something sort of interesting with that, but it would be a very ticklish sort of situation to handle. And it could be done badly so easily that I would rather just not take the risk, because I don't really see it being worth it. But I am perfectly open to being proven wrong. So, you know, I'm not trying to write anything off completely. I'm just saying how I'm feeling about it from where I sit now. So, then we go to chapter 15, and this is when, long story short, Vorkosigan is brought in front of the Emperor and told, hey, bruh, you're about to be Regent. And this is so funny because, like, I don't think anybody reading wasn't expecting this, right? Like, the way that he is summoned and the whole way that things are presented to him right out of the gate, I definitely felt like this is clearly where we're going with this. But it does seem to be a complete shock to Vorkosigan. And I don't think that's really true. I think that he has just, like, determined so heavily that he is not an option, that he has just buried his head in the sand. And it turns out, like, there is some lineage thing that is debatable, which the Emperor straight up is like, we're not going to talk about that now. We've had this argument before, but you are technically, like, next in line. And evidently he had never told Cordelia that. So she's feeling a little bit of a way about the fact that evidently you have been hiding this little detail from me. And the Emperor himself, he is just so, like, gratified when he sees her face and realizes that Vorkosigan didn't tell her. He's like, yeah, I fucking knew he wasn't going to tell you that. Surprise. But yeah, I had a lot of questions about that. But the Emperor, I actually wound up liking so much more than I expected. And that's not to say that he's not a piece of shit, because I'm pretty sure he's a piece of shit. Based on this, the sum of what he has done out there. But I was just, you guys know that the whole thing with him ordering his son to be killed, I got why that was so disturbing to Cordelia. And yet, to me, it felt like actually a man who is willing to take down his own son when he is that much a monster already. For me, that actually is representative of somebody who has the strength of will that I would want from a monarch, and somebody who is actually like doing their job. So I was predisposed to like him based on the whole plan there, because it just felt to me like this is somebody who takes his obligation to everybody very seriously, in a way that most people would not be able to like set aside their fatherly feelings and acknowledge what their child had become. And I admire that. That's the kind of ruler that I would want to be. And I don't know if I could manage it. But so like, I came into this sort of feeling like, I think that I may be able to respect this guy, but I wasn't sure what his actual personality was going to be like once you talk to him. And he turns out to be like kind of funny, and he really understands Vorkosigan in a way that makes it all the easier in some ways for him to manipulate him. Because look, Vorkosigan, he's difficult, but he's predictable in a lot of ways. You know what I'm saying? So there's definitely like a part of me with all of this that I'm like, yeah, if you are somebody who does what's expected the way that he does, I could see. But anyway, this whole conversation is, it's so inevitable where we're heading here. Because he just says straight up like, okay, so who do you think should be regent? And the way that he says it, and Vorkosigan's response, Vorkosigan looked as if he'd just bitten into something vile, but was too polite to spit it out. And he says, Vortala. I wasn't sure whether that reaction was to Vortala, like the concept of this person that he doesn't really approve of, but is the best answer to the question, or if it was going to be like, this is the first sign we're getting that he knows what's about to be asked of him. Do you know what I'm saying? But in any case, he first says Vortala, then he says the princess, then Vordarian. The Emperor's eyes snapped open. Oh, for God's sake! Gather your wits, boy. He does have some military background. We will discuss his drawbacks at length if the doctors give me another week to live. Have you any other jokes before we get down to business? This was very funny, you guys. I like him. I just like him. I'm a little bit sad that he's about to die. I love when he says about one of the people, like, oh, but they're not a Vor. And Vorkosigan's like, then make him a fucking Vor. Who cares? Vorkosigan, said Vortala, aghast. He's not one of the warrior caste. Neither are many of our best soldiers. We're only Vor because some dead emperor declared one of our dead ancestors, so why not just start the custom up again as a reward for merit? Better yet, declare everybody a Vor and be done with the whole bloody nonsense forever. The emperor laughed, then choked and coughed, sputtering. Wouldn't that pull the rug out from under the People's Defense League? What an attractive counter-proposal to assassinating the aristocracy. I don't believe the most wild-eyed of them could come up with a more radical proposal. You're a dangerous man, Lord Vorkosigan. I absolutely love it. And then he just says, you can stop wriggling, Errol. You shall not wriggle out of this. There is something about that sentence and how it's just taken for granted. You know exactly what the fuck we're talking about right now, sir. There is absolutely no other option. Even when I ask you for your suggestions, you really don't come up with anything. Come now. Can we just talk about this? Like, I don't know, you guys. This just tickled me. I was really caught off guard by how much I liked this guy. So, he then says, well, Cordelia, are you going to convince him? You know, like, this is so, the way that she says this, she catches me really by surprise occasionally with, like, the profundity of the way she views the world. And it's the sort of thing that I appreciate about her. It's part of what bonds her and Vorkosigan is this is the way they both see things. But, the wording that she has for it, it's so polished sounding. And I don't want to say, like, in terms of it being polished like it's rehearsed exactly, but more like this is something that she's thought about and has the language for in a way that suggests to me she's been through it a few times. So Cordelia says, when we came up here with this vague talk of a post, I thought I might urge him to take it up. He needs work. He's made for it. I confess I wasn't anticipating that offer. She stared at the Emperor's embroidered bedspread, caught by its intricate patterns and colors. But I've always thought, tests are a gift, and great tests are a great gift. To fail the test is a misfortune, but to refuse the test is to refuse the gift, and something worse, more irrevocable than misfortune. Do you understand what I'm saying? No, said Vortala. Yes, said Vorkosigan. I've always felt that theists were more ruthless than atheists, said Izar Vorbara. If you think it's really wrong, said Cordelia to Vorkosigan, that's one thing. Maybe that's the test. But if it's only fear of failure, you have not the right to refuse the gift for that. It's an impossible job. That happens sometimes. Ugh, that happens sometimes, you guys. Ugh. That is such a mouthful. You guys, she's just so completely right for him, and he knows it. Like, this is what, when you have a partner that is the right person for you, this is the kind of thing they do. They, like, challenge you in a way that isn't necessarily, like, aggressive, but they will remind you, like, who the fuck you claim to be. And be like, so, are you? Inquiring minds would like to know what you want to be. Because I know what I think you are. Now, what do you think you are? It's just... yeah. And he later confesses that it's like... yeah, no, I'm afraid. I'm very, very afraid. And admits that now that he has her and he has a future, there's a sense of something to lose that he hasn't had in a really long time. So this kind of fear is like sort of a newer development. It's not like he's never had it in his life, but it's been a while. And that was a really like moving thing, that when things are beginning to go better in your life and you're offered a test, you know, as she's putting it, that has to be why, right? Like, the test doesn't matter if there's no stakes. So I have to assume that's why they pop up when things otherwise feel like they're going well. Because if there's a test and you've got nothing to lose, then you're just going to take wild risks and not worry about it. The point is having something to lose, or thinking you do. And being willing to risk that, you know? I don't know. I love this moment so much between the two of them. And let's see. I don't have to take it. I can turn it down. Can you? Their eyes met. It's not the life you were anticipating when you left Beta Colony. I didn't come for a life. I came for you. Do you want it? God, what a question. It's the chance of a lifetime. Yes, I want it. But it's poison, Cordelia. Power is a bad drug. Look what it did to him. He was sane too once and happy. I think I could turn down almost any other offer without a blink. And when he says, look what it did to him, he was sane too once, I was like, I don't know, man. He seems sane to me. Maybe he's like a fucked up person. That's not the same thing as insane. And he's making a really, really smart choice here. Anybody could say that this is the guy you want for the job. He could have done the easier thing, given it to somebody who actually wanted it, and he's foisting it upon a person who really, you know, like, knows what he's getting into. This is a good ruler. I don't know. I'm sure I'll find out things about him, but from where I sit, I just think he seems to have a good head on his shoulders in terms of who to have around him, the kind of talent to keep close. I would follow him. So Vortala is like, you gotta make up your mind. And he says, well, old man, I thought you might find a way to rule from your grave. Yes, I propose to haunt you continually. I just love him. I'm sorry. And he's like, you really have to get some staff together immediately. And Vorkosigan's like, I know exactly who I am going to hire. And so they wind up giving me the position to, what's his name, whose name I keep forgetting, Ensign Kudelka. I really have to try and remember that, Kudelka. And I love the reaction he has, because at first he's like, this promotion, wait, this is insane. Did you recommend me? Who's even going to be the regent? And then there's this long pause and he realizes, and Cordelia had been expecting for him to like kind of grin and be like, nice. But instead he has like a sort of shaken expression on his face and is like, oh, that's a big deal. And it's clear this dude may be like, he may be trying to put a good face and positivity on things, but he's not a fool at all and understands like the gravity of what's going on here. But he does follow that up with like, I mean, the fact that they're picking you is like one of the best choices they've made in a minute. So I guess we're on the right track, actually. And then we have a really sweet scene between him and Cordelia privately. And the Emperor had said something to her about like, oh, some shit that he said about you. And she asks him here, like, what did you say to him about me? And he gets like a little bashful. And he says that you poured out honor like a fountain all around you. And she says, that's weird. I don't feel full of honor or anything else except maybe confusion. Naturally not. Fountains keep nothing for themselves. Which is really sweet. That's like just, I don't know, I like it. You want to think this way about your partner, you know? Okay, so then we have aftermaths. And this is really moving. It really, really is. And it's the sort of thing that I'm like, I don't know if this person, people, if they're going to turn up again, if we're going to meet them again. It feels like, you know, Song of Ice and Fire, how the prologues and epilogues, is that the word I want? That they always take place in like a different area of the world from a POV we haven't seen before. And granted, in those, the people often wind up dead, but the point is to sort of like give the world a little bit more depth a lot of the time. So that may be all this is, and she may include these at intervals, and they're not people that we ever revisit or anything. It doesn't matter. Like, at this point, I don't have a preference either way. But the scene itself, it's very simple, and yet there's so much like complicating it. So there is a woman, and he calls her medtech, and she calls him pilot officer. Later on, we do get their actual names, and I'm trying to remember what they are, because she tells him that her name is like Tessin or something like that. Here it is. Falco and Tersa. So I'm going to try and remember that. But what they are doing is collecting the corpses of people who are killed in like these space battles, or perhaps even accidents. I don't know if that's also included, but it seems to me this is like, you know, the war and the aftermath of that. And they have a ship that is meant to lock onto debris of a certain size. And when he asks her, what should I set our scanner for? He suggests something like 40 kilos. And she's like, no, I'm talking like 1 kilo. And he is so taken off guard because what he's imagining are whole bodies. And she has to be like, oh, people are broken up in pieces a lot. Like, you've got to look for smaller than that. I'd actually prefer to go even smaller than 1 kilo. But then you just wind up with a ton of like busy work that doesn't go anywhere because it's all false alarms. So he does the 1 kilo. And so we like the tone of this starts off with him having a really particular like mental image of what this job is going to be like. He has a neural connection to his ship, which I also always think is like a really cool idea. And so he enjoys piloting, and being certified to do this he's really proud of, but he didn't get certified to do it until after the war had like just ended. So he isn't getting to do anything like heroic or glorious with his skill. He's picking up bodies, which feels for him like he's a garbage man. So his whole attitude coming into it is a little bit like salty and resentful. The picking up of bodies for him is sort of, this is a lot of energy and a lot of money and time for what? Like, they're gone. Just let it go. He doesn't have the reverence at all. And Tersa is coming into this as somebody who sees every person that they find as an individual with a personality and a history that mattered. And he really isn't getting it. Like, he is letting her do her thing, but being really judgy to himself about it. And she's aware he is being judgy, and she doesn't alter the way she talks about these people at all. And that is something I really like appreciate, because I could see, if I were her, continuing to feel the way that she feels about these people, but seeing the way he's reacting and just deciding, all right, you know what, I'm just going to let it go because I don't want to hear it. You know, like, he clearly doesn't agree with me. I don't need to, like, try and convince him. I'll believe what I believe. He can do his own thing. But instead, she's very continually vocal, almost doggedly, about all of these people being people, and emphasizing the importance of even their privacy. At one point she finds like what's probably a recording, and he's like, well, aren't you going to listen to it? And she says, no, like, it didn't even occur to her. She says it would be prying. And a lot of us would be like, this person's dead, it doesn't matter. You know, go ahead. Who's it going to harm? And I think in her perspective, it's like, well, harm isn't really what comes into it. It's disrespectful. Like, they may be dead, but they were a person, and they wouldn't have wanted anybody to, like, just go through their pockets and look at their shit. So I'm not going to do that. And the way that she brings them in, how cautious she is, because she has to use a sort of, like, what do you call it? Like a tractor beam, I think is the way it's described. He says, why are you being so tender with it? And she's like, well, you know, they'll smash up or they'll spin. Spinning, it must be very unrestful for them, don't you think? He stared at her. They're dead, lady. She smiled slowly at the corpse, bloated from decompression, limbs twisted as though frozen in a strobe flash of convulsion. Well, that's not their fault, is it? One of our fellows, I see by the uniform. Blech! You act like you enjoy it. Enjoy? No. But I've been in personnel retrieval and identification for 9 years now. I don't mind. And of course, vacuum work is always a little nicer than planetary work. Nicer? With that god-awful decompression? Yes, but there are temperature effects to consider. No decomposition. He took a breath and let it out carefully. I see. I guess you would get pretty hardened after a while. Is it true you guys call them corpsicles? Some do, she admitted. I don't. What do you call them? People. So, what we get eventually from this scene, she's doing a bunch of, like, identification on people using their retinas. They even have information about different Baryarans who are missing so that they can match up even enemy troops, which I really appreciated the, you know, comprehensiveness of this work. And then we get to this one scene. This was so rough. So she asks to go a little further out than their route is technically supposed to go. Because if there had been a particularly intense explosion, maybe people will go outside the bounds. So they do. And they find a woman. Bonnie reeled her in with enormous tenderness. He didn't really want to go watch this time, but the medtech seemed to have come to expect him. I don't really want to look at a woman blown up. Is it fair, though, to reject a person just because they're dead? You wouldn't have minded her body a bit when she was alive. And I really don't know what to think about that. Like, is it rejection? I don't know. And then she says, I'd sort of like company on this one. So she inventories this girl, undresses her, washes her, and then kisses her lips. And Pharaoh calls her a lesbian necrophiliac. Is that what it looks like to you? Her voice was soft and still unoffended. What a strange world you must live in inside your head. And he's watching this as this woman takes out a dress, a wedding gown from this suitcase and begins to dress this girl. And he is thinking here, she's a true psychopath. She brought clothing with her to dress up corpses in, like for fun. Like he's thinking that she's playing paper dolls. It's, again, she is right. His brain is crazy. And then he finally realizes, oh my God, she never had to do identification for this corpse. She never did the retinal thing. She knows who this is. And he turns around and he says, daughter. She pursed her lips and nodded. It's a hell of a coincidence. No coincidence at all. I asked for this sector. Oh. He swallowed, turned away, turned back, face flaming. I'm sorry, I said. She smiled her slow, sad smile. Never mind. They found yet one more bit of mechanical debris, so agreed to run another cycle of the search spiral to be sure that all possible trajectories had been outdistanced. And yes, they found another, a nasty one, spinning fiercely, guts split open from some great blow and hanging out in a frozen cascade. The acolyte of death did her dirty work without once so much as wrinkling her nose. When it came to the washing, the least technical of the tasks, Farrell said suddenly, "May I help?" "Certainly," said the medtech, moving aside. "An honor is not diminished for being shared." And so he did, as shy as an apprentice saint washing his first leper. "Don't be afraid," she said. "The dead cannot hurt you. They give you no pain except that of seeing your own death in their faces. And one can face that, I find." Yes, he thought. The good face pain, but the great, they embrace it. And that is the end of the book. The good face pain, but the great embrace it. I don't know, man. Is that true? I gotta think on that. It's one of those where I'm like, it feels profound. And I'm like, is this a kind of fake profound where you like, the more you think about it, the more you're like, that doesn't really mean anything? I don't know. I gotta think on this one. Ooh, there's a bunch of chat that I was missing. I'm sorry, guys. Hefe says, "I'd love it if I had cause to say that line sometime." Oh, wriggle out of this. Yes. Vicky says, "Profundity of how she sees the world is such a poetic way to describe it. Bujald is rubbing off on you." Oh, thank you, Vicky. It's so funny you say that is a poetic, because I felt like I was wording it very clumsily at the time. Jeff says, "I think for Arl, sane means not willing to commit terrible atrocities." Yeah, that's the thing about me, guys. You know, I really can be like, I don't know if ruthless is the right word, but I can be somebody who really shelves emotion for the sake of rationale. And Errol, I think, would judge me. I can't help it. And let's see. El Jefe, Jeff says, "Oh man, this bit was so cool. She takes the story of these powerful, high-born people and brings it right down to ordinary people doing normal, everyday work after the hell of battle. Maybe the great pursue the hardest work regardless of the pain." I guess that would make sense, especially in, like, Vorkosigan, his case. You know, he knows that this job he's agreeing to take on is going to be a fucking nightmare. But also, she's showing up, you know? But yeah, I thought that was a beautiful way to end things. This is something that's like, for me, always, the ending things is so tricky, and I have found that I do really respond well, even when a story is like kind of epic. If you bring it back down to something highly personal toward the end, I find that to be a real satisfying way of closing it out. That was the Dandelion Dynasty series is one that I will think about for a long time in terms of ending a series, because it is like, calling that series epic is not adequate. It's a sweeping story covering decades, and it's such a huge story with so many characters and moving parts that as I began to reach the end of the final book, I was just like, how is he going to wrap this up? How can he do it and it be satisfying? Like, there's just so many pieces in the air, you know? And he brought it right back down to like a relationship between two people in a way that was so satisfying that I was just like, ugh, and there it is. Make it about the people. Always. Like, that's always it for me. You know, I recognize that doesn't work for everybody. We all have our different things that we love about fiction. But for me, it's the characters, it's the psychology, it's the human nature. That is my jam and jelly and butter and bread. That's it. So doing that at the end of this, even though it is a kind of personal story because so much of it is romantic, having it be the relationship of somebody else that isn't our mains and managing to make it feel like it really matters, even when we don't know these people. We never met them. This is the first time, and we probably won't see them again. But you'll remember them. I feel like this is the kind of scene that sticks with you, you know? Anyway, okay, I have got to wrap this up, but thank you again so much to everybody for hanging out with me. Appreciate you a lot. Thank you, Jeff, for commissioning this one. And let's see when the next one is. I have got June 6th. Okay, cool beans. So not too long. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.